From the National Christian Foundation in San Diego, I'm Kim Moeller, and this is the Generous Girl Podcast, a show that shares inspirational stories about generosity through faith, family, finances, fitness, and friendships, as well as deep thoughts about what matters most and practical tips. My guests are all amazing women who have overcome adversity and are big believers in hope and in maximizing their time, their talents, and their treasures, and making their lives count. So we're so happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Generous Girl Podcast. I am joined in my studio today with a very special guest, Chaundel Holladay. Chaundel is married to Tom Holladay. Tom was a pastor at Saddleback for 32 years, and Chaundel was right there at his side. Tom created Drive Time Devotions. If any of you have listened to that wonderful app, it's amazing. And I met Chaundel because my husband years ago in 2000 was a pastor at Saddleback, and Chaundel was over all of the pastors' wives at Saddleback Church. So welcome, Chaundel. It's so great to have you here.
Hi, it's wonderful to be with you, Kim.
And tell us then, how I would love to start is a little bit about your family. And tell me how you met your spouse, your background, and people then will have a chance to know, even though you're living here in busy Southern California, I believe you grew up in a smaller town.
We did. For those of you who don't know, I am Rick Warren's sister, and Rick and I were both born in San Jose, California, and then we grew up in he's very accurate when he says a little town of less than 500 people, and called Redwood Valley, California. And it was fun, really fun. We had 5 acres and a pond, and Rick was kind of like Tom Sawyer out on his raft every day on the pond, and it was hilarious and very fun. I'm his younger sister, so I idolized him growing up. Aww. But we my husband, Tom, also grew up in the little town of Ukiah, and we all went to high school together. And so in my mind, it was like, I'm never moving to Southern California. Well, actually, we went to college in Southern California, but I was like, this is not for me. I'm going back, and I'm never coming back down here again. There's a real prejudice between Northern California and Southern California. It's like they're stealing our water and there are no trees. But anyway, God had a different idea. And about 33 years ago now, he called us to Southern California, and we have been here ever since. And I'm still grappling with the fact that now I've lived here longer than I ever did in Northern California, but we're not going to talk about that.
Well, it's your roots, though. I think it was just yesterday I saw a post of Rick and all of his vegetables that he grew in his garden.
Yes. Our dad was a big gardener.
Yeah, so you can just kind of see
I'm a big gardener.
Where that came from. But that's so amazing. It was a huge table. What does he even do with everything? Does he just give them to his neighbors? Or
Yeah, he does. He does. But we really, seriously, God called this time. Rick had asked us to come on staff several times. And we said, oh, no, that's duplication of effort. I couldn't imagine Tom not being a senior pastor. But it really is a big marker in my life, Kim, of trusting God when it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And actually, the first one in my life was marrying Tom, because he wasn't like Rick Warren. He was a different personality, and he was a younger believer. And I thought, oh, I don't want to lead him and everything. But God just worked and began to slowly show me over 4.5 years that this was the guy for me. And I literally thank God every single day that I married him. And we have been married 45 years now. And it's just, it was the first time in my life where I saw, there was a popular, Christian bookstore saying that said, at the time, that said, God gives the best to those who leave the choice with him. Mm. That it really marked me. And so then all I was saying was, then the move to Saddleback was another one of those things. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't want to do it. And, people who talked to me later said, you're crazy. I mean, who wouldn't die for that position? And I'm going, I didn't want to move to Southern California. And I didn't, it didn't feel like a good idea to me.
Right.
And you know what? God is a lot better than I am. He has
Oh,
a lot
as he
better.
always is, right?
And you know, I go back to those things and several others almost daily. I mean, I really do. And the fact that God does know better than I do. But you know what? God knows better sometimes about my daily plans too. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then 3 kids, right? And how many
Yep.
grandkids?
Well, it's going to be 10.
Wow. Oh, so exciting. So exciting. And you're now in this stage of life, right? After the 32 years at Saddleback, other years, like what you're saying is 45 years of vocational ministry and quote, retired, but I know you're very busy still.
It's really funny. A lot of people ask us, well, so what are you doing with all your extra time now? And I told you that sometimes I want to kind of go like this and slap their face. It's like, I don't have a lot of extra time. And I've heard Tom graciously say to people, we're doing a lot of the same things we did before, but we get more choice in it. And I would add that we have a lot more margin. And I just feel like it's a new freedom for me. I think it's a freedom that God wanted for me all of my whole life, and I struggled to try and find it. And there were some different extenuating circumstances and so forth, but I think that He wants us to live with margin, and I believe He wants us to live with margin in both our time and our treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is a principle that I personally believed in, but fought against and struggled all my life to implement it, but particularly in the time area. You know, we got some really good advice and examples early in our marriage about finances, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents were both Depression era
Mm-hmm.
children. They grew up in the Depression, and they were Baptists, and they were workaholics for the Lord with a smile on their face. But they taught me some pretty bad patterns in that area, and so this new season of really figuring out that it's okay to say no to some things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the things I've learned is finally accepted is that the routine of life takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
That if you know,
Very true.
some of you guys listening might be young moms, and you just think, my goodness, what did I get done today? All I did was wipe noses and little bottoms, and you know, it doesn't feel very like I've accomplished much. And I'm just learning more and more and more, even with now having more time, that it's about our where we fix our eyes and how who we're living for, and rather than how much we get accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I on the Enneagram, I'm a 3, which is an achiever, so I can fully relate to that of what did I accomplish? What did I achieve kind of thing.
Yep.
And like you said, often it's nothing. I feel like I'm like a hamster in a wheel. But I'm going to go back to what you said about margin. But in my prior role, before this current role with the
Uh-huh.
National Christian Foundation, I worked with a company called Gloo, Gloo, out of Boulder. And we helped a group in Kansas City that was doing something called Margin KC. And it was Randy Frazee who came up with
Oh
the
yeah.
concept.
Oh,
Yeah, and he wanted to have like 100 churches, and they want because he felt like you do need to look at margin, not just with your money, but with your time. Because if there's no margin in either, like if your calendar is just full, you don't even have time to sleep, you know, and your margin over here and your budget is just maxed, you're not going to live that balanced life. So I do agree for sure how we spend our time when you look at your calendar, how when you look at Quicken and where our money has gone to does say a lot, you know, about the person.
it
And
does.
on this podcast about generosity today, I want us to talk about with your role in your life, you know, the faith and finances side, which is what I think the listeners will really love from your side, because when we think about generosity, like as an umbrella, we do think of those three components: the time, the treasure, and the talents. And a lot of times generosity, people think of the money and, how much are we giving? And there's just so much more to it when we think of it as God just gives us our little life and our little thing to steward. And maybe we're out there living on 50 acres, and maybe we're living in a tiny little apartment in Manhattan, but everything he's given us in that life and those resources and the people and everything around us is what he's entrusted to us to steward.
Yes.
And
we are his stewards.
Yes. And I think like when the Marge and KC example, just saying we've just got the calendar all figured out, but the money over here is out of control. It's just not that balanced life. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that, because one of the things I like to do on this podcast is talk about how can somebody listen to this podcast and then just want to take that simple next step in their life. And, maybe women listening are in their 20s, maybe they're in their 70s, but I feel like anytime we're listening to something like this, it's like, okay, God, what do you want me to hear? And how can I take that tiny next step in my life? And one of the ways you and I have known each other is when we were at Saddleback all those years ago. And then that Bible study I've referenced before called The Journey, we had that hiking boot, and it was just take that very next step. So let's talk a little bit more about that in terms of how would you encourage that woman to take that next step when we're talking about like the margin of time?
Well, it's funny. I think there's the big picture, and then there's also boundaries. And I think that of course it's realizing that God owns it all and that he is our owner and we are his stewards, just like you said. And I think that when it comes to your time and your money, investment in people is always a really good thing. It's just really important. But, what I'm really finally getting a hold of, Kim, is that there's a limit. We all have limits, and we have to accept our limits. And I think that out of gratitude for God, a lot of times, I wanted to push the limits, how could I not help this one more hurting person?
Mm-hmm.
If we look at the example of Jesus didn't heal everyone. Jesus didn't stop and talk to every person that needed him. And we have to accept that just like there are limits on our money, there are limits on our time. There are limits on our talents too. Mm-hmm. And just because I'm really, really good at something doesn't mean I'm good at everything. And we need to be accepting. And to me, Kim, I'll probably say this 10 times because it just all goes back to, am I looking at him and letting God direct me in my time, in my talents, in my treasure? Because he knows it all, and he knows what's going to make the biggest impact in how I spend those three things. And he's going to do his work. That's a really important part for me that I'm still growing in. Henry Blackaby in Experiencing God starts with, God is at work in this world and invites you to join him. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is absolutely key for me to come back to that every single day. God, it's not, what am I going to do today and how can you help me? It's, God, you are at work in this world. Right. And you invite me to join you. What can I do to join you in your work today? Right. And that work might be cleaning my garage. I really mean that. Mm-hmm. His work might be for our family. He wants me to clean up some stuff in my garage. And that happens to be a favorite activity of mine. So
you're retired.
All those years, it was like, I don't want to throw this baby shower. I'd rather just clean my garage. But God says, no, throw the baby shower. you know, and so am I surrendered to him, you know? And the thing was, it was a really fun thing and it was a really great thing and had a great impact, that baby shower. But it's okay to clean my garage sometimes and to have that, again, back to that margin that God, it's all God's work. And
And he's a God of order, you know.
yeah,
So I
he is a
remember
God of order.
reading a book a long time ago where ordering your private world,
Private world.
ordering your
Ordering
private world,
like Gordon MacDonald.
Gordon MacDonald, exactly. And he talked about, like, you know, if your car is a mess and your garage is a mess, your house is a mess, like, you just can't, it's hard to function when
Exactly.
just everything is kind of not in its place. But you know, you might be having little ones at home and you feel like you're just spending your life at a 90-degree angle, like picking up everything. And
Right.
So the fine line balance of seasonality and yeah, they do think too, and there is that side of me that's knowing I should really do this. And it keeps coming to mind that it's like, okay, that probably would be, you know, a very good thing to do.
And just, are we checking in with him constantly? I mean, like throughout the day. And maybe this is just me because I have an issue in this area. But I think that all of us, we need to have our eyes literally sometimes and our hearts directed toward, am I living in submission to him? Because he always has better plans.
Yes.
And you wouldn't believe, you know, I've been a Christian. I celebrated my 60th birthday as a Christian this last week. And as a little girl. And it's just been a sweet time of remembering God's salvation and remembering that this is not, my life is not a work of my own, because I've known him all my life, literally. I mean, not, you know, I believe in a moment of salvation. So I want to be real clear about that. But because I've known him from such a young age, I've been familiar with the security of his love and the security of his plan for me. And somewhere along the line, with all that affirmation from my parents, I got a little, you know, thinking, I've got this, you know, and yeah, God can help me. And no. That's not the plan. The plan is I look at him constantly, and he knows so much better than I do, even in little things. Right. And the other thing I'm learning is that he really is talking to me a lot more than I realize. Those are not good ideas I had. They are the Holy Spirit directing me. Yeah. And you know, and giving into that is hard for me. You know, we talk a lot about our issues and what sticks us, gets us stuck, and what trips us up, and that kind of thing. And I don't know, about 6 years ago now, I figured out that Celebrate Recovery is a really big deal in our church. It started.
Explain what that is for the listener who might not know what CR
is. The quick version way to say it, and I think they wouldn't like this, is it's a Christian AA. But right. It is the idea of working principles and steps to recover, to identify issues in your life. It's like kind of like group counseling with non-professionals. You know, they usually advise that you have both. You know, that you have. Right. Therapy is so good for anybody. Always. Right. I've done it. It's great. Yeah. We have dear friends. Yeah. We have dear friends that are counselors, and I respect them so much. But anyway, I realized that CR is a very important program in our church, and I had never been through it. And I kind of thought, well, why is that? And I thought, well, I don't really know what my issue is. I thought, well, maybe I'm a codependent, like some people talk about. And, you know, I don't have a drinking or a drug or gambling problem, but I know I've got issues because I get stuck all the time. And I went to, we've done several CR groups for our pastors' wives. And one of the gals was leading a workshop on how to do CR groups for pastors' wives. And so I thought, well, I should go to this because I want to support her and encourage her and everything, you know. And the gal who got up to introduce her said, "Hi, I'm so and so. I'm a grateful believer who struggles with pride and blah, blah, blah." And I go, "Oh, no. Oh, Lord, not me. I'm the one with low self-esteem. I don't have the issue of pride." And through a very long process and being involved in a step study with three other, four, and then three other wonderful women, dear friends already in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I began to realize, yes, I do. And it's not the kind of pride like, oh, I'm just something else. Everybody look at me. I'm wonderful. Aren't you blessed to know me? It's more like, I think I know what to do here. I think I know what
With
you're
my
thinking
time or with my
and what,
treasure. Mm-hmm.
right. And I think I know what you're thinking and what your motivation is. And I am so dead wrong all the time. And God keeps lovingly and patiently showing me, you did it again. You acted like you know better than I do. And
Well,
so this
Chaundel,
goes,
thank you for sharing that. I mean, because it reminds me of that verse about, the heart is deceitful in all
oh,
things. And
absolutely.
we listen to ourselves thinking, well,
Yes.
I know best. And then it takes us down the road and God's sitting there going, really? You had to go down that road again? If you would have started with me, we would have ended up over here and it would have saved you a lot of time, a lot of stress. So
Yes.
and I just have to say, with you being Rick's sister, thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your vulnerability. And Rick and Kay, when, Pastor Rick shared at the beginning of their marriage, I remember he said to
Oh,
the congregation, MasterCard saved our marriage. Why? Because we were married all of 3 days and we realized that we needed counseling and we couldn't
absolutely.
afford it. And we put it on MasterCard and it literally changed everything, where they realized, no, we need this counseling, which then took down the stigma with the church of, oh, I shouldn't get counseling. I'm
Right.
perfect. I don't need it. No, it was like, wow, if Rick needs counseling and Kay needed counseling, then me, the average little Saddleback attender, needs to unpack,
Yes.
counseling as well.
Yes.
And there's a group, I'll just do a little shout out to a group in Orange County called Relationship 180.
Oh,
And
it's so
both
good.
you and I know a number of the people who are therapists there, and they have been so generous to provide services to people at Saddleback, the staff at Saddleback. So it really makes it a very healthy way, just like you would, go to the gym and
Yeah.
go, wow, I think I should pay someone to be a personal trainer or a
Yeah.
nutritionist or your financial planner, like all the other areas. And I don't know why the mental health side is the side that for many years it was like, no, you should be able to handle that on your own. No, I think we've come a long way. And another shout out to Saddleback with your sister-in-law, Kay, and what a beautiful job she's done in the entire, area of mental health.
Oh, yes. Oh, so important. So important. So just one of the things that I have, tried to kind of boil down some of the things about time. Just a couple more things I want to say on that before I go on to treasure
Sure.
is Sabbath is really God's idea.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like margin, it's saying, I've got 7 days and I'm not going to pack them all full. I'm going to take one day
To do a
and
reset.
to
Mm-hmm.
do a reset and to really to rest. And there's lots of really good resources out there on Sabbath. John Mark Comer has a series of podcasts on Sabbath that are really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all kinds of ways to do Sabbath, but the bottom line is, guys, just do it. Do it. Don't Mickey Mouse around. I, as a workaholic, I have argued with God about why I could not take a Sabbath for many, many, many years. But what happened, for me personally, it happened even before my kids left home. Is that we had a Saturday night service, and I finally got to the point, and my husband was highly in favor of this, even when he was preaching, is that I would go to church on Saturday night, and usually 2 services, and then I would stay home on Sundays and have a Sabbath. And I still do that. And it really, it just, I mean, Sunday I had 3 or 4 weeks in a row where there was good restful things, but like we were on a trip for two
Right.
Sundays, but not the same as just
Yeah.
absolutely sitting with God alone for hours
Mhm.
and reading and resting and, not just puttering, or going to the lake or whatever, but just being alone with God in
Mhm.
unhurried time. So,
Yeah, I love that. And for the listener who is not in the, retired season of life
right,
to have the
right.
unlimited hours, I remember someone gave me the advice of, try to do this Sabbath, this 24-hour period, like from the 5 o'clock on Saturday to the 5 o'clock Sunday. So we also
Absolutely.
brought our kids to the Saturday night service, and that was great. And unfortunately, sometimes Sunday mornings we had soccer games and sporting
Right.
events that we needed to do. But I really did try on that day to make it a day where I wasn't doing major house cleaning. I was not
Yeah.
going out shopping if I didn't
Yeah.
have to. And
Yeah.
again, all of it, I don't want to be legalistic about it. Sure. Did I
No.
have to sometimes? Absolutely. Or did we have some event that day? Yes. But I did notice when I could take that day and just not be driving kids everywhere and tell the kids like, hey, we're going to kind of be here in the neighborhood today rather than driving,
Absolutely.
wherever else. It was one day where I also could do a reset, just give me time to think and plan for the week ahead. And I totally agree with you. Whenever I'm traveling and then I come back late on a Sunday night and I'm starting early Monday morning, it's a way different feeling going into the week. So God, he definitely knows what he's talking about. Years ago, I worked with
He
Josh
does.
McDowell, and he talked about why does he tell us these types of things? To protect you and provide for you. And we have the choice
Oh,
of
I love
listening or not.
Yeah. Protect us and provide for us. It's so true.
Well, let me ask you, I know we talked about the overcoming adversity in a sense, but prior to the podcast, when you and I were talking a little bit, did you want to say anything more about that? Because I know you had a flood that you lived through. Anything else
Yeah.
that you want to add to that section?
Yes. Man, God is so good. But God is good in spite of what we go through. And our circumstances are not good. I mean, literally 2 days ago in my quiet time, God just reminded me through a devotional that I still think about this earth way too much, and I don't have my eyes on heaven. And it's kind of funny to me that I still struggle with that, and yet it's not, because we all do.
Right.
But
Totally.
because of some of the things we've been through, and yeah, there are probably some more, as we talk together about this, there are probably some more current
Sure.
things about adversity in my life, but they're not. It's not clear yet.
Uh-huh.
And there are two major things that we went through that were really, really hard, that are clear. And I go back to those, just like I go back to those God directing me things. I go back to these. God has been faithful through some major things. And the first one was we'd been married about 5 years or so when we wanted to try and get pregnant. And then we figured out that we had some infertility issues, and they basically told us we probably would not get pregnant and we probably would not have children of our own. And so that was a really hard time and really sad. And then about a year into that, we got pregnant. And it was like, oh, wow, this is really a miracle, God. This is like our one shot. We may only have one child, but, and at 11 weeks, I miscarried. And it was kind of like, well, God, why did you give this to take it away?
Yes,
And of
that's
course
so
now,
hard when it's like it seems like it's an answer to prayer and then woof,
yeah,
it's gone, and you think, did
yeah,
I mishear you? So
yeah.
hard. I'm so sorry.
So 40 years later, of course, I know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who have miscarriages and how common they are and all of that. But in that moment, it was really hard. But I didn't ever feel, like I would read Hannah from the Old Testament and stuff, but I never felt like I had a word from God assuring me that I would have a baby, either my own or adopted. We couldn't afford to adopt. So to us, adoption was out of the question.
Right.
And so at that time. And so I was just, but I had to trust him. And I had to trust him. And as you said, we have 3 gorgeous children and almost 10 grandchildren. And so, it, it, but, but God doesn't always work that way.
Right. Right.
I have
Exactly.
lots of friends and family who it doesn't work that way, and then a few years later, so then Ryan, our oldest, was born in, and when he was 17 months old, a levee broke in Northern California where we were living, and the water rushed in and destroyed our home and our church and several of our members' homes. And it was like Katrina. So when Katrina happened, we'd got on a plane to go encourage the people there and the churches there, and
Because you knew.
the ones that were helping those churches actually. And so we and of course we didn't have flood insurance, and Tom was making a very, very small salary.
Yeah.
And so it was really really hard. And
So hard.
but it was just mostly a lot of work. I mean, honestly, it was our 45th anniversary recently, and I grieved again all over all of the love letters and all of the journals that were lost, and they shouldn't have been, but they floated away literally out of broken windows in our houses, in our house.
Chaundel.
And so, like Tom, like Tom had his high school and college yearbooks at the church, and I had mine at home, but both were flooded and destroyed.
Oh my goodness.
And
45 years later, it's still painful. I'm so sorry.
Sometimes it is.
It is.
And yet it's not eternal. Those things are not eternal. I keep a gratitude list every day. And just recently, like a couple weeks ago, God prompted me to, I kind of go all over the page. I'm sure I was particularly inspired by Ann Voskamp, of course.
Sure.
And
1,000 gifts.
Yeah, but I write down from the ridiculous to the really important stuff. I'll put, a new baby was born, but then I'll also put, I got a really good deal at Ralph's today, But God really convinced me, spoke to my heart and said, I want you to write down at least one thing every day that could not be taken away. And to pull my focus to the eternal and to begin to look at circumstances. We all go through adversity. We all go through really hard times. And some of my friends, you've had Dee Eastman on your podcast, and the adversity she has faced is just mind-boggling to me.
Mind-boggling.
I don't understand. And yet God is the same. And God is the same to me as he is to Dee, as he is to you, as he is to anybody who looks toward him. And he is eternal, and he never changes. And so remembering to focus on the things that cannot be taken away. So much in our world, in our lives, can be taken away, but there are so many things, and those are the things that really matter.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Dee, because that also makes me think of one of the tenets at Saddleback is the importance of being in a small group. And I know that you and Dee as couples have been in a small group for a long time. So why don't you say something about doing life together, doing life in community, and how in your role with such high visibility, how that has helped you and shaped you?
Oh, it totally has. And we have been in this small group for, it'll be 22 years in the fall, and the same small group. And we have been through some adversity individually, but even relationally in a small group, and some really tough stuff. And God has worked in amazing ways in using us in each other's lives. And I believe in this so much. In our group of ministers' wives that I led for so many years, we had connect groups. We still have connect groups where they're not their weekly small group doing Bible study together, but they're checking in on each other, and they're doing life together, and they're praying for each other. And I actually am in a connect group with our 4 international campus pastors' wives. And I love connecting with them, once or twice a week, just saying, how are you doing? What's new at your church? And what's new in your lives? And, it just is those friendships that God uses in incredible ways. And like in Ministers' Wives, it was really easy for me to realize I couldn't care for 115 women.
Right.
And so we needed to break them down. And, I wouldn't know when everybody's, mother was in the hospital or they had a miscarriage or something like that, but their group leader would and would care for them.
No, that's so beautiful, because we're not meant to go it alone. And sometimes in those struggles, like you were sharing, of going through in those, early years, and then all the struggles over all the years, like if it was just you handling it, or you and Tom, and trying to just weather it through and make it look like, oh, you got it all figured out, we can do this.
Right.
It's just us and Jesus. No, that's why he gives us one another. We're all imperfect, but he brings those people around us who are just so gifted and have what we don't have, to complement us and to, carry us through and get us to that next top of the mountain where he wants us to be when we're down in that valley.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. So anything else you want to share in terms of, I know you mentioned one of the things before we got together about can feel overwhelmed, and how you've learned over these years to give it back to God. Anything else you want to say on that? Or do you feel like we touched on that enough when we looked at our schedule?
It's just, I want to say a couple things about treasure, okay. But I think that we just need to accept that we all have different stuck points, and it helps if you can identify them and talk to God about them. I am a big fan of journaling and writing out, God, I feel really overwhelmed this morning. And then it's like, oh, right. But you're God of everything, and you own the cattle on 1,000 hills, and you have all the time, and you're going to give me all the time and resources, right. Time, energy, creativity, resources, financial resources that I need to join you in your work, like we talked about. So I think
naming the feeling, calling it out. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. Talk about treasure, because I know we're almost at time.
I know. I just have to say quickly, I'm just one more testimony. God's principles work in this area. 45 years of marriage, and we lost everything in a flood. And my parents had nothing basically their whole lives. But they taught me over and over and over, you cannot outgive God.
Yeah.
And some people think that's really a cliche phrase, but anybody who's listening, I have proved it. Mm-hmm. I'm one more of those testimonies. Mm-hmm. I have proved it over and over and over. And it brings tears to my eyes, because it is so true. Mm-hmm. He is a giving God. He loves us so much. And he gave his most precious possession, his only son. And he came in flesh to tell us how much he loved us. And he is a giving God. And when we are Rick always says, when we are generous, we're most like God, and I just agree. And I think both in our time and our treasure, it's perspective and practice. And you've got to set your perspective. You got to settle how you look at things. And that's what I have to do. I have to do it all the time. I don't have to do it as often with money as I do with time, but you have to settle your perspective again. But you settle it ahead of time. It's not when you're standing in Costco and should I spend this $200 on this toy or not? I mean, adult toy, like, something to go to the lake with or whatever. And then it's practice. And so you set the perspective ahead of time, but then you have to work out the practices. I think with both time and treasure, it doesn't just happen because I say, oh God, I want you to own it all. And I want to be a good steward. You got to go, well, how am I going to be a good steward?
Mm-hmm. What are the baby steps to make
that
possible?
What am I going to be? How am I going to be a good steward of my time? Well, the very most important thing you can do with your time is spend daily time with him. And then the most important thing you can do with your treasure is to give your tithe immediately, no questions asked, and then begin to look at what are the other ways I can be generous. But the other practices you and I have talked about a lot for me, it's just downright fun to figure out ways to save money. And to
I know we could do a whole podcast on that, Chaundel, with our connecting on garage sales and bargains.
Yes. And so because, for those who are listening, because I lost everything in a flood and didn't have any money, I became an avid garage sailor. And that's my excuse for why I try to go to garage sales at least a couple times a month. And
you then need to clean your garage.
Yes. And that's also why I have to clean my garage. Exactly. But you asked what's a favorite bargain you've got recently. I do a lot of teas for people and, baby showers or just ladies leader teas and all that kind of stuff. I do a tea for my whole neighborhood every year to outreach. And so this last week I got some little, they were supposed to be nameplate things, but I can write the food labels on them and they're just really cute.
Those are cute.
And I could have spent a long time looking for them on Amazon and paid, but I got them for like $1.
Right.
And
I remember you told me one time you found a tuxedo at a garage sale.
Oh yeah. I have found everything. The thing at garage sales is I find things I didn't know I needed. And I mean, I literally do need them, but I didn't know they existed. But okay. So, I also think it's very fun to get stuff at the grocery store on clearance. And there's a whole tip on how to circle the outside of the grocery store. But one of the things that I realized as I was thinking about this, that has really helped me is follow blogs or Instagram now that really resonate with you, that work for you, as far as saving money. Just, don't follow people that you go, oh, that's stupid, or I would never do that, or that's too important to me to try and cut corners there.
Or if it's under the pile, I feel totally overwhelmed. Right?
Yeah. And so just pick one or two. I love Mary Hunt, Debt Proof Living, Everyday Cheapskate. That's really, really fun.
Okay, so we will have all of these tips of yours in the show notes. And I usually like to end with the Bible, book, and the bargain. So you mentioned already the book you mentioned the podcast series, John Mark Comer.
Oh my goodness.
Let's do, what's your verse? What's your Bible verse?
Well, I want to end with that.
Okay. All right. So actually.
Yeah, I shared the bargain. I'm doing them backwards. I shared the bargain. So the book is Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. By John Mark Comer.
That's I've heard that book. Other people have recommended it. I need to add it to my list.
Oh, it's incredible. But for me, it was particularly incredible for me because I have hurried my entire life. Mm-hmm. And I remember when my daughter was a newborn and she was like 3 months old and I was doing a baby shower and I was and she's going to be 36 this year. And I was killing myself running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And I said, I am not going to live the rest of my life this way. And I'm just now kind of getting
well, that's the thing about Christianity. It's very daily and God gives a lot of grace.
It is.
And he keeps us here on this earth to keep learning it. I mean, go ahead.
And Ruthless Elimination of Hurry took me about 2 years to read because I read like one chapter every fifth Sabbath.
That's great. That's really good.
Another really quick book that I've just recently been introduced to that I love is Breath as Prayer. Have you heard of that?
No, who wrote that?
Oh, goodness. I'll have to go. I have to look.
We can put it in the show notes. That's okay. Breath
It's
as prayer.
just Breath as Prayer. And it's about deep breathing exercises, but then you inhale part of a verse and you exhale the rest of it. And let me get it. I want to get it right. This isn't my verse, but I'm going to go quick. My help comes from you, maker of heaven and earth. So my help comes from you.
Inhale first and say that.
My help is coming from you. I'm going to get filled up because you're the maker of heaven and earth, so I can relax.
I like that.
Oh, it's really good.
Deep breathing is really so healing too.
Yeah, it's really short. It's really good.
Okay, and then your last, your Bible verse. And I'm sad we're already at time.
Nothing is important as our personal relationship with God. It's just all about the time we spend with him. I have to stop every morning and just lay it all down. And like I said, for me, I write it out a lot of times what I'm hanging on to and I need to let go of. And I just came upon a verse that I've seen before, but like 2 days ago, maybe it's yesterday. Look to the Lord in his strength. Seek his face always. That's Psalm 105, verse 4. And I thought, okay, God, that's really short. I could do that like 50 times a day, and just stop. And it worked yesterday. After I'd said that verse and seen that verse and been reminded of it. And I have figured out that I need to stop, that a major part of my quiet time I was missing was worship. And I don't mean listening to songs, I mean worshiping. And I use Psalm 145 and just say it back to God and worship him and remember that it's all about him.
Oh, that's beautiful. I know some people will use their Apple Watch and set an alarm, every 15 minutes or every hour to recall and do what they're trying to do throughout the day.
It's just what it's all about. It's going to affect everything. We can do all kinds of good principles and good practices. And if we're not connecting constantly with our maker, our creator who loves us unconditionally, then it just doesn't work.
Yeah. We all know the verses in John about being connected to the vine, and it's a very simple analogy with the little iPhone here, but if I don't plug this thing in, it's just completely going to die, and it needs to be recharged every day, every evening. And as we need that throughout the day, being recharged, renewed by God's Spirit, connected to him, because on our own, we're just quickly going to burn out. We're going to lose all of that battery, lose all of that power. And obviously we don't want it to be Kim's power, Chaundel's power, because that's very ineffective. And we want that out of the way so that God's power can make our lives, 1,000,000,000% more effective than just our strength of ourselves. So we all have the knowledge, and yet it's always a process for each of us.
It's constant practice. It's constant practice. But the thing is, when I come back to him every morning and say, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm doing this again, that I failed again yesterday. And he goes, it's okay.
I love you.
Forgive you. I love you. It's okay. And if you hear anything different, that's not the Lord.
That's right. Oh, well, you are beautiful, Chaundel, and this has been such a treat. And I know the listeners are going to be very inspired by so many nuggets of truth that you shared. So thank you for your time, your wisdom, and all of your faithful service, serving the Lord, and in that role at Saddleback, all that you gave to everyone, not just the pastors' wives, obviously, but all the women, the lives, the families that were touched by you. I don't think you have a clue until you get to heaven to see how God used you in many, many ways. So God bless, and thank you again. Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.